Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger from the Schiller Institute. Welcome to our International Strategic Webcast today. It's March 1st, 2019, and we'll be joined by the founder of the Schiller Institute and our president, Helga Zepp LaRouche. These last days have been extraordinary in the depth of machinations, movements on all sides on the strategic picture. And in a sense, it looks like we see the clash of the two paradigms in very bold relief. I think the place to start is what happened in Hanoi, the summit meeting between President Trump and President Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Helga, what's your reading of what happened there?
Well, I think it was a step forward. I think that both the Trump assessment and also from the North Korean side was that the two sides have come closer to each other than they were before the summit. Now, obviously, that means they did not get the possible expected breakthrough, but, in a complex question like the North Korea, South Korea, which involves obviously all the other strategic factors, US, China, Russia, it is not necessarily a disaster and completely unexpected that you would not get a breakthrough of that dimension in one or even two meetings. So I think the interesting thing to look at is that both sides, Trump and Kim Jong-un, expressed the wish to continue the negotiation. And if you look at the difference, how absolutely hysterical the Western media were. They said, you see, this was a complete failure of Trump. He obviously thought he could negotiate a business deal and he just doesn't know how to do these things. I mean, there was a completely different reaction coming from Russia, from China, from South Korea, from Japan, all of whom expressed the absolute conviction that this is on the right track, that it must be continued. And I think that is absolutely the case because, I think the real incredible, circumstances which shows you how nasty and how absolutely vicious the old paradigm is trying to fight against the possibility that Trump would get an agreement about denuclearization of North Korea with Kim Jong-un. Was the hearing, which was scheduled for exactly the same day for the former lawyer of Trump, Michael Cohen, in the Senate. And then if you look how this was orchestrated, this absolutely slimy character, Michael Cohen, used all kinds of words against Trump, from con man to racist to even worse ones. And that naturally was absolutely pushed by the media internationally, the Western media, mainstream media internationally, to basically say that the absurdity that Trump only did the North Korea meeting to divert attention from the much more important question of the hearing of Michael Cohen. When the exact opposite happened, they decided to, use the Michael Cohen story to basically create an environment where, you had the most unfavorable environment for such an important meeting to take place. Now, this incident alone should tell people what is really going on, because there was an unspoken or maybe even spoken rule in the past that when a president or head of state is conducting extremely important diplomatic negotiations abroad, that would be absolutely respected and nothing would be done to interfere with that. And this incident really shows how completely broken down any code of conduct, any civilized behavior is on the side of the opponents of Trump, or, better, of the opponents of the new paradigm, and the idea that you could have actually a world in which conflicts are overcome through negotiations. I think it shows you how absolutely barbaric the tone has become. And I think it really should backfire on the people who conducted that. So as for the North Korea situation as such, I don't think it's it's a disaster. I think it will continue, and the Russian, I think he's the spokesman of the foreign ministry, Peskov, actually said that this diplomatic situation between the two countries again proved that you cannot get progress in a step-by-step manner. And that actually is, I think, what really is the case, because the world situation is so complex that you have to find solutions which address all of the problems, or else you don't make progress anywhere.
Go back for a moment to this juxtaposition between Trump conducting very high-level diplomacy and the Democrats in Congress using Michael Cohen not just to distract from what Trump is doing, but to run him out of office. Trump made the point in the press conference afterwards, and also in his discussions leading up to it, that he's working with Russia, he's working with China, with Japan, with South Korea. Afterwards, he spoke to the leaders from those countries. And so it's clear there's an ongoing cooperation on the highest levels among the most important nations in the world. And that's not just disregarded by the opponents of Trump, the never-Trumpers. That's what they're trying to stop. And I think that really, as you say, was in bold relief from the way this thing played out over the last couple of days.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your point.
Well, my point is that it demonstrates the nature of the coup, that it's not about anything that Trump did related to Russia. It's what Trump is trying to do in terms of shifting the strategic paradigm.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we discussed this many times, that was the whole nature of Russiagate. The moment Trump indicated in the election campaign of 2016 that he was in favor of improving the relationship with Russia, and then what he did in the initial phase of his administration with Xi Jinping, improving the relationship with China, that this indeed is the absolute nightmare of the geopolitical faction on both sides of the Atlantic. Because once you have US, Russia, China, possibly India and other nations, if they work together, the whole British game of manipulation goes out of the window. And, I think under the circumstances, Trump is doing an incredible job if you consider the forces he's up against.
Now, you mentioned the British in this. We see a couple of other operations underway, one of which is the fighting that broke out between India and Pakistan, which is extremely dangerous, and also the regime change coup, which seems to be underway with Venezuela. What do you think is happening with India and Pakistan, and how can that be resolved?
Well, obviously, the trigger was the terrorist attack by this terrorist group in Pakistan, attacking the Kashmir, and 40 Indians got killed. And then you had this exchange of fighter jets being shot down. Now, obviously, I mean, if you have two nuclear powers who historically have a rather adversarial relationship ever since the division of India after following the independence, this is extremely dangerous. And, there were in the past many worries and scenarios that, could have regional nuclear wars exactly between such powers as Pakistan and India. Now, obviously, both sides in the meantime, Prime Minister Imran Khan and I think also the Modi government, they expressed that they are fully aware of the fact that if there would be a nuclear war between the two countries, it would be the annihilation of both and be a terrible catastrophe possibly for the whole world. So I think there are moves being made to cool the situation down. But on the other side, the situation remains extremely hot. There's still military exchanges going on. So I think it is very important that there again, as we have seen it in the case of North Korea, you had Putin, who telephoned with Modi. You had the Chinese government and also Trump, all offering their, mediation and offering to help to cool the situation down. And these two incidents, North Korea and now also the situation India, Pakistan, demonstrate that the world absolutely needs the cooperation of the four major powers, at least, the United States, Russia, China, and India. And that is one of the reasons why my husband, Lyndon LaRouche, had called already many years ago for a four-power agreement to address all major problems of the world situation, including the need for a new financial and credit system, a new Bretton Woods system. But I think, it really shows you that the world is urgently, crying for a solution, because as the case of Venezuela shows, I mean, here you have the full-fledged neocon regime change policy in place, and the only good thing is that, in the meantime, all the Latin American countries have come out speaking against the military intervention. But, I think there you have a flare-up point where, unfortunately, President Trump has been pulled into, unlike in Syria, Afghanistan, North Korea. So therefore, the situation there remains extremely dangerous.
And Helga, this brings up one of the other questions that needs to be resolved, which is the tension that's emerged over the U.S. Threat to withdraw from the INF Treaty. This is in the background. This brings up again lowering the threshold for nuclear war. What's your thought about where this is headed?
Well, I think, it is definitely a very dangerous development, because, it may be that President Trump wants to accomplish some other treaty, replacing the INF, but this is a very tricky question. I think that, there is not so much the immediate danger that you would have immediately medium-range US nuclear weapons deployed in Europe, because as far as I know, there are no such weapon systems in the pipeline which could be established immediately. If they were to be positioned there, it would basically bring us back right to the situation of the beginning of the 80s, where you had only a few minutes, and therefore all the forces of the Warsaw Pact and NATO were on launch on warning. But, I think the more immediate situation is that it opens a Pandora box, because, once you break down all disarmament or arms control treaties, like the ABM system, ABM treaty has been canceled many years ago. Now the INF treaty, it basically brings down any kind of treaty arrangements, and it could lead to all kinds of developments. This brings me to the point I have made many times. I mean, obviously, some people say that behind that is the effort to get the Chinese into an INF agreement. But, as some experts were writing in the recent period, it's not very likely that the Chinese could agree or would agree, because if you just have an INF approach, it would mean that the Chinese would have to give about more than 2/3 of their entire missile arsenal, which they obviously will not do under these circumstances. It brings me to the point which I have said many times. If you look at the totality of all of these problems, Venezuela, North Korea, India, Pakistan, then the whole situation of Southwest Asia, which remains extremely fragile, the situation with Ukraine, I mean, all of these things have the potential of leading to a large, if not the final catastrophe of a third world war. And, given the fact that, the old paradigm is collapsing, it's disintegrating, and there are people and forces representing this old paradigm who are pushing confrontation, I think it is extremely urgent to recognize that either humanity moves to a completely new type of thinking, a new paradigm where you basically establish a system of new international relations which takes into account the security interests, the economic interests, the political interests of all nations. And the only way how you can do that is to establish a higher order of a system, a new paradigm which overcomes geopolitics and puts humanity as one first, and then all national and regional interests second. Now that is what Xi Jinping has been proposing with his new Silk Road, the Belt and Road Initiative, and the idea that we have to build a community of shared interest for the future of mankind. And you can see right now that it is that idea which is being fought by many of the neocons in the United States. For example, Marco Rubio, Mitt Romney just came out basically attacking the Confucius Institutes as if these schools where the Chinese language and culture is being taught, as if these would represent the biggest threat to the national security interest of the United States. But I think it is really very important that we develop a different kind of thinking to approach all of these problems, because I think that the idea of Nicolaus of Cues, who thought these things in the 15th century already, that in order to solve problems, you need the coincidence of opposites, the coincidentia oppositorum, as an approach to solve problems, that you find the higher level of reason where the problems which on a lower Aristotelian level of contradiction are looking insolvable can be solved. And that is what Albert Einstein also expressed in a different way. He said, you will never find a solution with the same method which caused the problem to arise. And that means you cannot just geopolitically, try to put this puzzle here and that puzzle here, but you have to define the common interest of humanity. And the best way to do it is to look at where should mankind be in 100 years from now? Where should we, and hopefully will be, we will have commercially used thermonuclear fusion power, which will give us energy and raw material security. We will hopefully have established villages on the moon. We will have plans for interstellar space travel as an international effort. We will join our efforts on the common aims of mankind, such as, asteroid defense. We don't want the planet Earth to be, attacked or hit by an asteroid or some other body which, could cause a big destruction like it happened 65 million years ago. So we would have to put our minds together to, develop better knowledge about the laws of the physical universe. We are living in a galaxy which is only one of 2 trillion galaxies, about which we know really very little. I mean, we are just infants. We make infant steps in knowing what our physical universe is. We have to find out what is the real process of life. We had this wonderful recent breakthrough by the Chinese when they landed the lander and the rover on the far side of the moon. And then a few days later, they were able to have a little cotton plant sprout and even develop buds on the far side of the moon. Now, okay, there were human beings on the moon before, so life was on the moon before, but it was for the first time that other than human life developed on an extraterrestrial body, which is obviously extremely important for the future of colonization of space, the ability to have long time space travel to grow food in space. But it just shows you, that we are on the verge of completely new breakthroughs in terms of what is the definition of the human species, what we can do together, once we stop squabbling like little boys, kicking each other on the knee, and that we develop our creative powers together as the creative species in the universe. There may be other creative species, but we haven't found them yet. So I think we should really mentally, and I think I'm appealing also to you, our audience, because it's a mental exercise to not think in terms of sensuous experience only, or just project your experience from the past in the future. Do it the other way around. Have a beautiful vision where you want mankind to be, and then try to apply that approach to the problem solving in the world today. And then you will realize, that is the only way how you can find creative solutions.
Well, that I think defines what the task is for our listeners. We just had a Schiller Institute conference where among the topics that came up was this question of what is a threat to national security, identifying the Russiagate scandal, the Mueller investigation as one of the threats. And presenting new evidence at that conference was Bill Binney, the former NSA technical director, who has a new article out with Larry Johnson in which they rip apart the argument that there was Russian hacking in the 2016 election. I don't know if you want to say something about that, Helga, but the videotape from that whole conference is available on the Schiller Institute website. Did you have any thoughts on the Binney Johnson new article?
Oh, yes. I would really urge you, our viewers and readers and listeners, to study this article and spread it around as far as possible internationally. Because what Bill Binney and Larry Johnson in this article present, and Bill Binney at the conference of the Schiller Institute in Morristown, is really incredible. I mean, it is the absolute undebatable forensic proof that there was no Russian hacking, that it was instead that the emails from the DNC server were downloaded, because all the technical data, the speed with which these things were recorded, absolutely do not make it possible that it was via the internet, but it was some kind of storage device, probably some stick, and that also the formulations used by the NSA, with which they presented these accusations some years ago, that they had confidence, that considerable confidence that it was like that. This is in the talk of the intelligence community. If they would have definite evidence, they would have said we have full confidence, and they would have also tapes, the NSA tapes, all of these things. They could trace the origin of such a hacking. And the fact that after more than 2 years they have not presented any such evidence, it speaks absolutely to the fact that there was no Russian hacking, and that they made the whole story up, that the whole Russiagate was an invention. Also, very interesting is the fact that Bill Binney, I think more than a year ago, was actually able to meet with Pompeo and gave him the entire findings, what these networks of the VIPs, the Veterans for Sanity and Intelligence, had produced. And he never got any feedback. There was never any answer from Pompeo. So I think this is really incredible, because the whole Russiagate story, the whole Robert Mueller investigation, completely disintegrates if you look at this Binney evidence. And therefore, obviously, the US Congress must immediately investigate that, but also other parliaments around the world, given the fact that the Russiagate and everything which hangs on that is not just a US-Russian affair, but it is a strategic matter of the highest importance. Other parliaments should absolutely investigate that. Investigative journalists should look at this material, start to comment on it, interview Bill Binney. I think he needs a flood of interview requests from all over the world to get this story out of the control of the mainstream media, which are already obviously sitting on the whole story. I think such an action is extremely important to occur now, because it is expected that by the next week, Robert Mueller will issue his report, and who knows what will be in it. But I think the best way to get the truth on the table is to interview Bill Binney, to get investigations going and really blow this story apart, because it's the biggest, it will turn out to be the biggest scandal in US history. But if it's not uncovered, discovered early enough, it could really lead to a very terrible strategic catastrophe. So it is urgent to act, and I'm appealing to you to do so.
And the presentation by Bill Binney at the Schiller Institute conference was in the first panel of the conference, which took place 2 weeks ago. Now, Helga, we're sort of short on time, but I think we can put two things together here. The insanity of the Green New Deal as it's rolling out, as it's coming out in the United States, with the new reports from Germany about the incredible cost of the so-called decarbonization. In a sense, what we're seeing is an open admission by some people, including Ocasio-Cortez, that in order to protect the environment, humans have to disappear. She actually really said that. So if you can just comment on this, the Schiller Institute is involved now in a major mobilization to address this Green New Deal from a higher scientific standpoint, as you were just talking about. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, this so-called Green New Deal is really only the latest, rebrewing of an old brown source, which we have seen in the eugenics movement, which was renamed in the post-war period to be the conservation movement, because Hitler had given eugenics a bad name, and which later developed in the form of the ecology movement after the Club of Rome invented this fraud of the so-called limited resources on the planet. All of this has been scientifically completely refused, because the whole thesis that we have limits to growth, or we need limits to growth because the resources of the planet are finite, is a complete fraud. My husband wrote a beautiful book about this called "There Are No Limits to Growth," which people should read. And it basically makes the obvious point that what is a resource is completely determined by the level of science and technology with which you define what you are looking at. And obviously the human creative mind and creative power has the ability to again and again develop new insights into the physical universe, and therefore completely redefine what a resource is. So if Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is now coming out with this thing, it is a almost unveiled effort to prop up the hedge funds and similar investors of Wall Street and the City of London. Most of the hedge funds are sitting in the City of London anyway, and create a new investment boom into matters which are, by the nature of their character, leading to a depopulation. Because if you go entirely to low energy flux densities in the production process, what the greenies call the so-called carrying capacity of the planet goes down. And the CBE, the commander of the British Empire, as he likes to call himself, or be called, Schellenhuber, the former head of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Change Impact, who wrote this incredible paper for the transformation of the world economy already some years ago, calling for the decarbonization of the economy. No nuclear, no gas, no oil, no gas, just so-called renewables, even if nuclear would be a perfectly fine renewable. But basically he said the carrying capacity of the Earth is only 1 billion. And Ocasio Cortes even went so far to say that people should have less children because, the children are causing problems for the environment. So the absolute barbaric nature of depopulation is out in the open. And, I think that people have to wake up to the fact that this so-called green policy is really a brown policy. It's just the same it's the same old wine in new bottles. And, we have seen this exact program already in history about more than 70 years ago with terrible consequences. It's just a new form of the same thing. Now, if Germany, which is unfortunately completely green, if Germany continues on this and goes for the decarbonization of the economy after there was this mindless exit from nuclear energy, which means Germany will have soon no nuclear energy, no coal, because they now want to go out of coal until 2050. Germany will cease to be an industrial nation, and it will have terrible social consequences. The living standard will collapse. An aging population, will not be able to be maintained, and it will be a terrible thing. Now, there is a research institute for combustion engines, and they just made a study which said that the minimum cost of such leaving of coal for Germany would be anywhere between $800 and $900 billion until 2050. If you go for a maximum scenario, it would be more or less like 1.5 trillion euros, obviously with the shrinking productivity of the economy. I mean, this is the death knell of the German economy and absolutely must be reversed. So I think the Green New Deal is, really something which absolutely has to be recognized for what it is. And if you look at this complete charade, where this Greta Thunberg, a little girl from, or not so little, 16-year-old girl from Sweden, is being carried around from Davos to now she's in Hamburg, trying to whip up an international children movement, where school children don't go to school on Friday, to say, oh, since Alexandra Octavio Cortez has said that we need to solve the problem in 12 years, there's now a little girl of 5 years who said, oh, if this problem is not solved, I will commit suicide when I'm 13 because the world will be gone in any case. Now, this is really evil stuff. And if you look at who is financing it, now the mother of Greta Thunberg got an award from the World Wildlife Fund already many years ago. The whole thing is financed by Soros and other foundations, and it is absolutely a new effort to brainwash young, impressive children and turn them into anti-science little monsters. So I think we have to have a drive to really discuss what are the laws of the universe. The character of the universe is not a closed system, very much to the contrary. And the best antidote is space travel and the discovery of new resources on asteroids, on the moon. What the Chinese just did with, they plan to bring helium-3 from the far side of the moon for a future thermonuclear fusion economy on Earth. That's the way to go. But I think it's really this Green New Deal is the last effort by a dying empire to impose its anti-population policies, and people should recognize for what it is, a brown policy.
And the best place to go to get the material you need, the ammunition you need to combat it, and to mobilize your friends, family members, and so on, would be the Schiller Institute website. Become a member. Look at the videos from the conference that just took place that Helga mentioned in Morristown, New Jersey, a science panel, a music panel, and the keynote panel where we discussed this question of the four-power agreement. So Helga, I think we've covered most of what we need to cover. Is there anything else you want to bring up?
No, just, become politically active, because this is a breakpoint in human history, and we will either end up in World War III or we will create a new epoch. So become active with the Schiller Institute.
See you next week.